Have you ever felt the echo of missed chances, the silence where the sound of celebration should ring out?
That sting of lost opportunities is often due to a failure to truly connect, to resonate with potential clients, to communicate the true value you bring to the table with passion and precision.
The truth? It's not the lack of service quality that hinders, but the absence of warm, compelling, and persuasive communication.
These really are game changers, the secret ingredients to turning maybes into definites.
And that's where we come in at Teachable Moments.
So if you're a lawyer, financial advisor, business consultant, accountant, trustee, director, sales leader, subject matter expert, or anyone else offering professional services, this podcast is tailored just for you.
Time after time, opportunities are missed and businesses and careers stutter because of a lack of simple, teachable communication and negotiation skills. I'm David Sullivans.
And I'm Matthew Dashby-Hughes.
Welcome to Teachable Moments.
Coming up in this episode,
we're going to look at what happens when things go wrong for you as a professional and how you deal with it. Apologizing authentically, taking ownership of the problem, stating what the facts are and the implications for the other party, the client or the customer or the supplier, and then either offering a solution or offering to work with that party towards finding a solution together.
So, David, in this episode, we're going to be talking about what happens when things go wrong, that amazing spirit of the fact that we tend to learn an awful lot more from our failures and from the scar tissue that we earn along the way than we ever learn from our successes. So thinking about this from a business development, a sales perspective, if we were to sort of think about some of the transactions we've entered into or tried to enter into, some of the client relationships that we've tried to build, but then for whatever reason we failed. You must have some great stories to tell. Tell me a little bit about, some of the kinds of challenges you've experienced over the years.
The really big one, which is where you, or when I say you, the professional, financier, accountant, whatever lawyer, has done something that has really screwed the whole deal up. And it's not mid-deal, it's actually at the end, and you realize something terrible has been done, which actually really strongly affects the client. That is the worst of all possible worlds for a professional. It's the one that keeps us up at night. And I actually had this quite recently with a member of my team who did something understandably, but it really screwed the client. My normal is we ring the client, we say, here's what's happened. We apologize profusely. We don't do that false celebrity apology, which is, I'm really sorry that you might be upset with this. I can understand why this might not be what you wanted. I'm sorry, we got this wrong. We misread this. The effect of it is this, and we explain really clearly. And then we go on to what we'd like to do is try and work constructively with you to make this work in the end. How can we reverse the situation? How can we put the genie back in the bottle? How can we take it forward? Sometimes even how can we make it better by what happened? I've seen that happen very rarely, a few times, where you do something wrong and everybody works really hard to make it better, and somehow that happens. So that's a kind of normal situation. I think in life, you put your hands up. Somehow it feels, now this is a feeling rather than the fact, when it's not you, but it's someone in your team, and that's happened to me recently, I feel more able to handle it. I know it's that person's fault. I clearly have to protect the member of my team, but I kind of feel, okay, I didn't do this, so I can, and the client or customer knows I didn't do this, so somehow it's easier to get the relationship back. Does that make sense?
Unpacking a couple of things that you just said there, I think the key thing is taking ownership straight away, apologizing with authenticity, making it a genuine apology, not a superficial one, stating the facts, talking about the consequences, and then presenting a potential solution or a way forward in a really coherent way that is conciliatory, authentic, without being overly emotive on it, but at the same time being completely and utterly respectful for the fact that this position that you've put them in, or a member of your team has put them in, is not what the desired outcome was at all. So it potentially restates and salvages the relationship. And I think, building on what you've just said, it's that there's the classic cliched phrase of success has many fathers and failure has none. And it reminds me of JFK, John F. Kennedy, and the whole kind of Bay of Pigs disaster, which was, it was less than 80 days into his presidency. He takes advice from the CIA that actually it's a great idea to go and, conduct this invasion, which, if you've read a history book or you were there at the time, it was an absolute unmitigated
I am
disaster.
too young to have been there at the time. I want you to know that.
Me too, absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but I am a student of history, so I tend to read a lot of these things, and I think in this particular instance, he actually stood up afterwards, and I think he saved his presidency in a lot of ways by actually stating that cliche: success has many fathers, failure has none. However, this failure is mine. As president, I'm taking complete ownership and responsibility for this. And it speaks to that sincerity of apology that you're talking about. And then you fast forward to a year later and he's dealing with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he completely changed his decision-making process. So he demonstrably learned from the mistakes of the first time round and learned from those mistakes. So I know that's a big world stage kind of example, but it really speaks to exactly what you just talked about.
You're absolutely right. But there's a big, unfortunate modern caveat to that. And which is with professional firms where you have indemnity insurance and you have a position where your first thought is, oh God, I've got to ring compliance and tell them. Because your compliance director runs law. As I told a chap recently where someone in my team had made a mistake, which is very rare. I said, look, I've got to speak to compliance. And it felt like the Grim Reaper, even though we have a very good compliance director. And the reason for that is there is indemnity insurance. So it's a real problem. And I don't have an easy answer. I know that when it's happened, it's really, really rare. So I'm struggling a little bit for stories. I've tried to make the client feel held by us and that it's a specific thing. And by and large, on the few cases, the client has decided not to take action against us because he felt held by us through it, realized a mistake had been made. Some money had been lost, but for the client, it was really important to preserve the relationship.
The people who are listening to this and watching this, this is designed as a podcast for people who are in professional services, and a lot of professional services, not just the law, but a lot of professional services are highly regulated environments. And so there will be limitations on what you can say based around your insurance policies and so forth. But ultimately, whether you are highly regulated or simply hold yourself to a higher standard of behavior, being comfortable with a level of scrutiny is critical if you are going to do your best work on any client's behalf. And to some extent, that ability to show up and take ownership and I suppose, take your lumps when things do go wrong, because it doesn't matter how good you are, not everything runs smoothly all the time. And it's how we respond to things when they don't run smoothly. And, I think if you sort of think about it from a reputational risk management point of view, well, my natural inclination is to try and solve the problem where I've screwed up rather than necessarily just put the client's position first. But if you do think about it, as you have done throughout the whole transaction, the whole relationship, hopefully, that actually you put their needs before your own, then that is the best way you've got of actually salvaging the relationship and maintaining it.
I mean, it's a very difficult situation. And there are times when I had a transaction, this happened recently, where very, very, very long-term client, and the client pulled a fast one on us. He had fallen out with his business partner, and we were acting for him, not the business partner on this, although I'd known them both for most of my life. We got to the completion, and the client got us to do something which we weren't supposed to. I don't mean it was illegal. I mean, he'd said, don't get that document signed because it released the other partner. And we said, well, you should do that. And he said, don't worry, I'll sort it out. And what he did, which I didn't know, he was using it as a lever to get the other guy. And I found that on completion. And we were stuck because we hadn't done it. We'd been told not to do it. We'd done what we were supposed to do. And it got to a situation where I was so upset, and I spent so many years mediating between these partners that I actually resigned as their lawyer after, I can't tell you, decades. And I simply said, I don't want to act anymore, because the most important thing is trust. And not just trust of me, but trust of you. It gets us back to that trust thing again. Trust is something, and I actually resigned. And as it happens, we had a conversation several months later in which he asked me to explain why I was so upset. And when I did, he understood. And he said, I'm so sorry. I never really... And we rebuilt it. Now, there's been no transaction since, so I don't know. But the promise was we would try again.
Interesting.
So it can work the other way. That's with a lawyer where the client does something to you or doesn't act with trust. That's also difficult.
To the point you're making, trust is a two-way street. It really is. And, in order to have trust, one must be demonstrably trustworthy, which means that you have to be able to show that you have a benevolence of intent in both directions. And when somebody hasn't conducted themselves with openness and honesty, in this instance, he'd deliberately or probably deliberately hidden something from you about his intentions, and that of course does completely undermine the basis for trust. So, the easy part of trust is being credible and reliable. Knowing what you're talking about and actually doing what you say you're going to do.
Doing it every time, over and over again,
consistently. Yeah. So you'd like to think those are kind of the tickets to the game, aren't they?
Yeah.
Whereas the other bit, the actual benevolence of intent and the intimacy and openness between two people, or between two parties, that's the bit that requires constantly. It's a bit like showering. We have to do it every day, because you have to keep on feeding that. You have to keep on watering it.
Absolutely. Or you smell them, people don't go near you, which in this Zoom world doesn't matter so much, really.
True.
But I think, to go back to, I think that when it's the professional who's made the mistake, in the best possible world, you own up. You say, I'm really sorry. And also, where you have done something wrong, and it's not a complete deal breaker. And I always say this, but don't go to the client and say, oh my God, I've done this. You can go, I'm afraid we made this mistake. We were wrong. We shouldn't have done this. Here's a potential solution. What do you think? Always go with the potential solution at the same time, if you possibly can.
Absolutely. And taking another non-professional services example of exactly the same thing, you may recall a few years ago, there was a scandal where horse meat was found in a number of foodstuffs throughout the country, including
there was a great advert about that, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was, yeah. There was there was the Findus pancakes. There were various things, but Tesco's was one of the retailers that was heavily implicated in it. And the very next day after the news broke, they took out a full-page advert in every single one of the national newspapers. It cost them tens of thousands of pounds in order to place this advertising. Early right-hand pages, which, if you know anything about advertising, that's the most expensive spot because it's the one that's highly visible. Full pages everywhere. And you are talking a lot of money to do this, but it was a huge, great big, we take total ownership of this. It's a mistake. We apologize. We've undermined the trust between us and our customers. We're so sorry. Here's what we're doing about it. Exactly what you've just said. It was rapid. It was timely. There you go. And whatever one thinks about, Tesco's, that was straight out of the playbook of how to do reputational risk management really well.
I remember reading the book. Do you remember when Coca-Cola brought out a different Coke?
Yeah, New Coke, yeah.
And it failed absolutely abysmally. They spent millions on that. And they spent millions in decades building the generational thing about Coke, and then they changed it like this. Some guy in a laboratory said, we can do this. And I remember they had to spend millions, and it took years to rebuild the brand.
Yeah.
So in business, that voice you're talking with, be it a brand voice, a personal, it's got to be consistent. Tesco's have always sold themselves as the reliable retailer, the one that you loved, the one that you would take home with you. And they delivered on this, unlike so many other people.
It's a great example. And I think I know it's sort of hard to see necessarily straight read across from a high street retailer or a large supermarket chain and professional services, but actually the read across is that we're all dealing with human beings. And ultimately, it comes back to that word we've just been talking about, trust, which, we talk about credibility and reliability and intimacy divided by self-orientation. If you have selfish self-orientation and a lack of benevolence of intent, that is the thing that will most undermine trust. Whereas if you have demonstrable benevolence of intent, that is a force multiplier for trust.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously Tesco's didn't have a compliance director they had to talk to, but years before the modern day, before the way we live now with the insurance the way it is, on the very rare occasions I would have the conversation with the client. And I do remember one of my longest standing clients many years ago, where they were buying a restaurant or a pub. And they bought it. This is I think the first deal I'd ever done in that arena. So it's many years, decades. And the director said, can I have a look at the premises license? And I said, what's that? And he said, David, the whole value of it is the premises license, which is the operating license that allows it to remain open and serve alcohol and food. Every restaurant, pub in particular, a lot of its value is attributed to the licensing hours, the premises. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm sorry. He couldn't believe it. I said, so I said, I'm really sorry. He said, okay, here's what it is. Here's how you've screwed up. And I just said, I really got that wrong so badly. Let's make it right. We got onto the landlord system. We got onto the licensing. We put it all back together as a team, him and me. Now, he was very benevolent. He could have just thrown me under a bus, and I would have deserved to be under that bus. But he didn't. And in those days, I could say, I just got it wrong. I didn't know. Now, I've never made that mistake again, ever, nor has anyone who's ever worked with me. I can tell you that. First question is on any kind of hospitality is, what's the license look like?
Yeah.
Show me. Let me see. I need to feel it. I want to know what it looks like. Is it real?
Yes.
So you learn stuff like that, but it's difficult waters now. It really is. And it saddens me because sometimes we allow the insurance indemnity to, it prevents us from exercising and demonstrating our core values to clients when you really want to go, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But you can't. So just for this part of what we're talking about, if you possibly can, take ownership. If you can't, find a way to take ownership of that part that you can take ownership. Even if it's, I can't talk to you about this. I really care about you. I want to make this right with you. I was very open. I said, it's as painful for me as it is for you. Actually, it was more painful for him but you need to take care of, I want you to take care of yourself here.
Yeah.
And I want to be a part of that. But right now, right here, in this moment, on this specific part of the transaction, I cannot be your guy.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think that's absolutely great advice, that is, David. And I mean, just because I'm conscious that we've not got huge amounts of time to talk about these things, and we could go on for days talking about the way these things can play out. I'm interested to hear, thinking about a transaction at the other end. So when we're first starting out our relationship with a prospective client, and maybe during the course of the deal process or during the course of our initial conversations and negotiations with that client, it breaks down and they actually end up either not doing business with us straight away, or they end up choosing another provider, and maybe not even a provider that will genuinely do the best work on their behalf. And you're sitting there with your head in your hands going, wow, they've just committed an act of self-sabotage by not instructing us there. Not meaning that arrogantly, but we know that we were the best people for the job. Have you got any examples of that for me?
Well, I've got two, and these are not pre-prepared. One's come to my head, and one's happening right now as we speak.
Interesting.
And I'm waiting to hear what happens. So I'll tell you the one. I had one in the past where he'd been recommended to us by an existing client, and he and I got on really, really well. And it was acquisition of a hospitality group. And then we got to the question of fees, and I told him the fees, and he said, "You're just too expensive for me." And I really got it as low. He wouldn't have it. "I'm really sorry. You're the wrong guys for us." I said, "Okay, well, I want you to know that you can come back at any time that you want." He said, "Thank you." But I thought that was it. About 5 to 6 months later, and I knew that the firm he'd gone with were wrong for what he was doing. I couldn't say that. 5 to 6 months later, this guy rang me. He was literally in tears. This is not metaphorically in tears. He was literally crying. And he said, "David, I've made a terrible mistake. They didn't do it properly. And here's the effect. We've lost lots of money and they couldn't do." And I just said, "I'm really, really sorry. What can I do?" And he just walked back into this was metaphorical, back into my arms as opposed to literal. And he just said, "Thank you so much." And from that day, we just charged him the normal reason, pay whatever it was, always whatever it was. And he's still with us now. And this is years ago. And I knew that it was wrong, but I couldn't do anything about it.
Right.
I couldn't do anything about it. The other one is one that's going on right now, and I just don't know what the answer is. And it's because we were introduced a few days ago to what could have been a very good client. And a pitch was made, and the pitch was good by my team. And it sounded really well. We were told we'd got the deal. And we got the deal because the partner, the lawyer who was acting for them originally, there was a conflict situation, so they couldn't act on it. We were told we got the deal. Yesterday, we heard late afternoon that the original lawyer had gone back to the client and said, "I still can't act, but you've got to use the lawyer that I recommend. He's a really good guy." And they said, "Well, we've already met our firm." And no, he said, "You got." So they phoned us and they said, "Well, we're in a difficult position. We are going to speak to that person today, but you're not out the frame yet." And the person in my team who was doing it was really quite upset because she pitched it and got them.
Mm-hmm.
So I know this morning she was playing out what she could do to reverse it, get it back to us.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult situation. We talked about the deals that we'd done that we could refer to them that were similar to the deals they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about references.
Yep.
And it was just one of those annoying things. It was a very interesting deal, financially rewarding deal.
Sure.
And it was in our hand and it's gone. And unfortunately, that happens all the time. So all you can do is go back into it with renewed vigor. What I never do, and I never do, is I never say to anybody, "You're using the wrong law firm. You're using the wrong accountants. These are the wrong brokers or fundraisers for you or financiers." That's arrogant for me.
It is.
I want them to come to us because of who we are. I let them find out for themselves how bad or how good. It's because it's not fair. I don't know these people really.
No.
I know of them, and I may have dealt with one or two people in their firm. I just think, it's like life. If you speak badly about other people, it ends up you looking worse.
It's very interesting, and it's particularly interesting to be talking about this because it's a live matter, and obviously I only know what you've just told me. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it strikes me that, and for those of you who are listening and watching to this, if you haven't seen our episode or listened to our episode about communication, that might be really relevant at this point, because we talk in there about the fact that you win hearts and minds in that order. Start with the heart, and then the mind will follow, and that actually people will buy emotionally and then justify intellectually. I think that was a really key point we made previously. Here, we're talking about a situation where somebody has come to, as a trusted advisor, to a potential client and said, no, you can't use them. You've got to use this. And potentially they've given a justification, but it doesn't sound like they have necessarily. What they do sound like they've done is they've used some level of coercion, or maybe sort of used a bit of fear. And so that's an emotional thing. So when we respond to that emotional trigger, to respond with facts and figures, and here's the deals we've done in the past, is a natural thing to do, and it's quite persuasive. But it's only persuasive to the rational part of the brain. It's not necessarily speaking to the right part of the brain here. So my instinct on something like that would be to actually ask questions that would help to tease out in the prospect's own mind where maybe some of the emotional intent is coming from, so that they come to their own conclusion about what the intention is, and that maybe, and I'm not going to accuse the other party of acting in bad faith, but maybe they aren't acting entirely honourably here.
But you're right. I mean, it's and I'm hoping that the result is successful.
Yeah.
And we'll find out. And it's difficult. You have to accept that. I've heard it described as when you're pitching to potential clients, it's like you're offering them cups. It's like a steward or a stewardess on a plane offering them cups of coffee. Do you want one? Yes, I want one. I like one. I feel like I need one now. If they don't take a coffee, I don't think the steward or stewardess feels rejected. It's the right time, right day, right moment, and you can say the right thing, or you could say the wrong thing. No, I don't want sugar. For goodness sake, take it away. It's kind of, it really is a moment, a day, and sometimes you just can't get it right. And what you mustn't do is beat yourself up about it too much.
100%. And I always teach my clients to remember SW4, which is not just the postcode to Clapham, by the way. It's SW4 stands for some will.
That wouldn't be first on my list. Yes.
No, it wouldn't. But it stands for some will, some won't. So what? Someone's waiting. I want your business. I don't necessarily need your business. That not in an arrogant way, but it's a nice mindset that means I'm showing up here not necessarily because I want to sell you something, but because I want to work out whether or not we could do business together in a way that is mutually beneficial. So it means I'm not being pushy, I'm not being salesy. The mindset is, how can I help you? Can I help you? Am I the right person? And so, yeah, no, I totally buy into that. I love the coffee analogy. I'm going to use that one. I like that a lot. So I'm believe it or not, I'm conscious of time here. We're actually coming right to the end again. So, David, if you had to summarize, what are the key takeaways that we've got here?
Well, and this is always conditional upon your compliance director, always take ownership of it. Ownership, not in a, I'm sorry, that might have upset you. Ownership, we did this wrong. First of all, ownership. Secondly, explain clearly the implications to the other party of your screw up, so they really get what it is. I don't mean cover yourself in ashes and burn yourself, but explain clearly, and then ask the question: would you like to? And this is what I do. Would you like to work with me in a constructive way, taking this forward and seeing how we can make this better? It's something I mentioned in a previous episode about consent. Where there's been a screw up, don't make the assumption they want to work with you on it. Would you like to work with me on this again? And there's something warm about that asking, and something warm about that consenting for me. So I think they're saying three, yeah.
Beautiful. No, those are really helpful, healthy takeaways. And I think you've got some really actionable ways of working there. So, David, as always, thank you very much indeed. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks very much. That was great. I enjoyed that.
We want to hear from you too, so hit the like button, leave us an honest review, and please share with friends, colleagues, and anyone you think would benefit.
Yes, and make sure you take action and benefit from these teachable moments.
Don't forget to be here next time. We'll have more tips and tools that you won't want to miss.
So subscribe now and stay informed.
And we'll see you next time on Teachable Moments.